Today's video was brought to you by Coscom Cosplay Supplies. Coscom Cosplay Supplies provided all the foam and all the clay. They actually reached out to me and said, can you make something with some of our products? We'd like to let people know a little bit about what we do, and they think that we make some cool stuff. And we do make some pretty cool stuff. And quite frankly, when I got the product, I was pretty happy with it. It met all the standards I need to use in all my own commercial work. But when I found out about their pricing, I really became happy. I found that compared to some of my local commercial vendors, it's as much as 1/4 of the cost when I'm going out to a local box store. Versus my online purchases, it's about 70 to 80% of the cost. They're located in Massachusetts, and that can also make a difference in terms of shipping fees if you happen to be near us. But Coscom Cosplay Supplies provided all the foam, and I'm pretty happy with them.
What's up world, Corey here with Extreme Costumes, and we're going to show you a deep dive on how I built this thing. So this was mainly two components, as you know, EVA foam and foam clay. This was a lovely mixed medium, and I'm very happy with how the product actually turned out. This used a combination of not just foams, but also Bionicle pieces, and Nerf gun pieces, and some tubing, and some cabling, and any other random doodads or propellers or anything that I could find that actually looked cool. As for sculpting the skull, so this was the most fun part of the build for me. It was definitely different because I had never really free-formed with foam clay before, so this was a challenge. One thing I noticed is that if you do work with foam clay, or if you haven't before, it's kind of more of working with dough, or if you're a baker, fondant, than it is any normal clay that you probably have worked with. So it definitely droops, it dries weird and awkward, it doesn't hold its shape the way that other normal clays do, and you have to encounter that when sculpting. So if you're free sculpting with foam clay, and different ones are different, but the ones we got from Coscom Cosplay Supply is great, but it does take a couple days to fully cure. In that process, I was able to really shape the skull. I wasn't able to get this high level of detail you see now on the first day, or the second day, or really on the third day. So it was every day, it started very rough, and then the first day it looked terrible. It looked just like a mess, as you can see here. It looked absolutely terrible. But the next day I was able to add a couple more creases. I was able to lift the eye a little bit, or pull it, or shape it slightly. I was able to add some more creases underneath, the cheekbones and in the eye socket. So over the couple days that it took to dry where I actually put most of the forming and detail of the actual skull in. After I had the shape where I wanted to, I then took a Dremel and started carving out any extra details that I needed to, like around the teeth, or sharpening the edges around the temple, and that really helped, pull it out or smooth out some edges that I thought were a little bit rough. After that, of course, I sealed it with Plasti Dip, and then a nice coat of nice grayish tan color. I think it was khaki from a camouflage one. I was very committed to using in-house products only. Everything we had to make this, we had on hand at the moment. And I definitely didn't want to go out and start buying specific materials for this. It was more like, hey, we have some foam clay now, we have some good EVA foam, we have a bunch of materials, let's just make something awesome. As for weathering the skull, I started off with a nice brown for all my shadows, which really warmed up the color in a nice way. And then I just highlighted it with a nice off-white that I had with some acrylic paints. Same process, put a little bit on, wipe a little bit off. But important distinction when you're doing with washing is how you do your shading and your painting. Like what technique you use will drastically affect the outcome that comes out. So I tend to use a nice watery for my darks, and my blacks I tend to do more of a wash, but then I tend to dry brush my highlighting. For me, that difference in texture really makes it slightly more noticeable and subtle at the same. It blends nicely, but it lets the highlights be a different texture, which makes them catch the eye a little bit better. And I would very, very, very subtle on this. Like, you really can't even tell in the finished product. And that's what I like about it. As for the jaw piece, this was really only 3 pieces of foam that I then just cut some foam strips. I ended up beveling these edges just to make them look cooler. As for the ear cups, these were containers for a light, but where the battery cap screwed off, it just looked cool. And then I covered it with a nice little toy propeller blade we had lying around. My favorite part of most builds is painting it and taping everything up like a Christmas present and peeling it all off. But as you can see, not all materials take paint very well, and I did not sand up the propeller blades, so there was a nice little, fixed that up with a little bit of acrylic paint and a small paintbrush. It was gone. You can't even tell, even up close. If you look at it, you can't tell. This build really taught me that anything could be anything. And a nice thing we like to say here at Extreme Costumes is nothing is sacred. And being able to just find random things that I thought looked cool, but I was like, this one piece I think would look well here. And come to find out that it wasn't the way that I thought it would, but by flipping it over, it now fit in a way where the aesthetic looked nicer. I ended up covering a lot of our Bionicle pieces with some EVA foam here, as you can see, just because I didn't really care for that part of the piece. I really only liked this arm and this hook and this little back end looked cool, but I really didn't care for all the holes and the connectors that were here, so I just covered them up. This is just a strip of foam that I had bent and glued down, but using different textures and different sheens of paints will really accent the textures that you have in your actual product. But since this is a mostly grayscale piece, going with graphites and silvers and bright chromes and black and gloss black and satin black and all those really help, because then I could pick and choose where it's like, I wanted the outer ring here to be gloss, but I wanted inside here to be matte, and I want this to be a graphite and this to be silver and this to be chrome. A good way to accent your piece is just to then go over and paint the little nuts and bolts you have a different color sometimes. Because here I made them black, that helps them stand out a little bit more. But I also went through and added gold on all the tiny little nuts on the greebles and greeblies that I have all over this. And then I just went over everything with a nice chrome wire trim sheathing. I don't know what this is. It's like a cable sheathing decorative rope. But we had it and it looked cool, and I went over it as a trim, and that really helped brighten the build a little bit. These bright chrome wires. Also, one thing I did here is that I added as much ventilation as I could, because I know, especially if you're wearing an actual mask underneath this gets hot very quickly. So I wanted to make it breathe, and that really helps. So of course, by adding all these openings and everything, it'll breathe. But since these little covers for our Nerf guns are hollow, because they have to shoot Nerf guns, which is just compressed air, I was able to just drill the hole and push them through the back, and this actually acts as a ventilator. That actually breathes through that actual hole. It's completely hollow behind that. And also inside here, I had drilled the holes and I had hollowed them out extra big on the inside. So that way that also allows more air to come in. So if you aren't wearing a mask underneath this actually breathes very well compared to any other mask of this size. A full face mask out of closed cell foam is not gonna breathe. But I'm really happy with this piece. It looks a lot more complex than it actually was. It was a very simple build, and it was fun to just go with the flow and just figure it out whatever worked. Because I ended up redoing this chin piece because the original one I had was just too heavy and bulky. If I were to do it again, or things I'm going to change or may upgrade to this, is that right now it's just one strap, and I definitely might add maybe one going down the middle, or maybe a piece of plastic inside the jaw just to give it a little bit more structural support. But for only a couple days, and really the skull being the only actual piece that was really focused on, everything else was just going with the energy of the piece. Definitely want to add some lights. You know, we definitely talked about maybe chroming the skull instead of a bone. Ooh, that just sounds cool. But this was a nice, easy, fun way to make a cool, high-tech skull mask with a mixed medium of products that we had laying around. Big shout out to Coscom Cosplay Supplies. Wouldn't been able to do it without them. They're a fantastic company. Please check them out. But yeah, definitely stay tuned because we will be doing a lot of upgrades to our stuff. And of course, we're going to be making some more. Now back to Tom.
If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe on either YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. We're going to be showing different products on each one of the platforms, and we look forward to seeing you each week.